I want to start with tomorrow's demonstration. Tens of thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of people expected in D.C., millions globally. Some people might be surprised, even confused by the incredible turnout we've been seeing. But break this down for people at home that aren't quite catching on. What is driving people to the streets in these numbers?
You know, I think it's really very simple. People are outraged at what they're seeing on their screens, on their phones, on their computers, on the television, of how Israel is treating Palestinians, the number of people being killed, the number of children being killed. And there's just outrage among Jews who are saying, not in our name, among healthcare workers who are saying, stop targeting doctors, among journalists, among young people. We're seeing it among federal workers. This is a new thing. I've never seen this before. People who work for the federal government who are saying, wait, we can't do our job if we're being asked to be part of supporting this terrible set of genocidal policies that are going on, carried out by Israel, but with a lot of money coming from us. And a lot of people are coming into the streets because they know that the U.S. is giving $4 billion a year just to start directly to the Israeli military. And they're trying to give them $14 billion more. The $4 billion a year that we give every year to the Israeli military could instead, if it was kept at home, it could be used for 1.4 million kids getting health care. It could provide 23,000 clean energy jobs for a year. And that's a lot of money. And it's being used for the wrong thing. And that's one of the things that's driving people into the streets.
Yeah, and driving the opposition that we're talking of here. And South Africa has made the claims that Israel has waged a disproportionate military response and blockade on Gaza that amounts to a genocide. Of course, Israel has rejected those claims. Genocide is a pretty heavy word, and it's used by both sides. Israel has argued it's fighting against a terror group trying to commit genocide. How can folks at home make sense of what's happening right now as this debate plays out?
You know, international law is usually very complicated. It's really only lawyers can understand it. But ironically, given that genocide is such an intense concept, the Genocide Convention that's part of international law and is part of U.S. law, it's actually pretty simple. It basically says that violating a whole host of different things, different parts of the laws of war, as they're called, become genocide when two specific things happen. The first is if the country carrying out what you claim is genocide has a specific intent to eliminate all or part of a group. It can be a racial group, a religious group, a language group. It can be any kind of social group. In this case, it's the Palestinian population of Gaza. And that was shown by the South African lawyers very dramatically by statements from the Israeli president, the Israeli prime minister, the secretary of defense, cabinet members, members of the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, military leaders, who said things like, there are no civilians in Gaza, we have to kill them all. They said, we're here to erase Gaza from the face of the earth. One of them said, these are human animals. Somebody else said they should be killed with a nuclear bomb. And the prime minister himself, Prime Minister Netanyahu, he, of course, invoked the story of Amalek in the Bible that calls for killing everyone. Men, women, children, suckling babies, even animals used for food should all be killed. And so that's one part of it, to show the intent. The other part has to do with actions. And the international law says that if you carry out even one of 5 specific actions, while you have the intention to get rid of this group, it counts as genocide. Israel has carried out at least 4 of the 5. So the first is killing people. They've killed more than 23,000 Palestinians in Gaza under their bombs. The second is injuring. They've injured tens of thousands more. 1,000 kids have had to have amputated limbs, often without even anesthesia, because there is no medical capacity left. So it's in that context that they're saying this is genocide. And it's in the context of years of the government of Israel, the state of Israel, trying to push Palestinians off their own land. It began with the creation of the state of Israel in 1948, when 750,000 Palestinians were expelled, were kicked off the land, stolen, their houses were stolen from them. So the South Africans, more than anyone else in the world, I think, after the generations of apartheid that they suffered, have seen what they call apartheid in Israel as well, recognized that, and they said, you know what, this is even worse. This is now at the level of genocide. So they were brave enough to bring this case.
And we will see how it plays out. And Phyllis, my understanding is that it could take years for a decision in the ICJ case to be determined. So what does this really all mean for the parties involved here in the short term? And should the court side with South Africa, could its ruling even be enforced?
Well, it certainly can take years. It usually does in these international arenas for the full decision to be made. But what the South Africans did, they asked for a preliminary decision by the court on an emergency basis because what's going on in Gaza is so urgent. People are being killed every hour, every day, children in the hundreds every day. So they asked for what they called provisional measures. And they're very basic things, 9 of them. The first one is to stop killing people, stop your military operations. The second one is to allow humanitarian supplies in. It's things like that that the court could issue a preliminary decision in just a few weeks. The enforcement is tricky. You know, the International Court of Justice doesn't have an army. They don't even have a police force they can send around the world to enforce their rulings. But it is still very important and still has a big impact. There's issues of international credibility. If Israel, who recognizes the court as legitimate, they've sent their lawyers to contest it in court, they signed the genocide treaty, they're a party to the treaty. Given all that, for them to just say, well, we're just going to ignore it, they will lose an enormous amount of credibility in the whole world. So public pressure increases all over the world. Some governments might decide that they want to start doing some of the things that the International Court of Justice calls for, even if there's no official enforcement. So, for example, an arms embargo, saying we're not going to buy arms from or sell arms to Israel as long as they continue this. They might say that we're not going to buy surveillance equipment. Israel sells more surveillance equipment to governments than almost any other country in the world. So if a lot of countries said, you know what, we're not going to buy Israeli surveillance equipment to use on our own people anymore. We might find it somewhere else, but we're not going to buy it from Israel. That's going to have a huge impact on the Israeli economy.
Certainly
so
could
there's
be
consequences.
Absolutely,
There's
consequences could have some very negative implications for Israel moving forward.
But very positive for the Palestinians, exactly.
Phyllis Bennis with the Institute for Policy Studies, thank you so much for coming on and breaking it all down for us.
Thank you.